Welcome everyone to Savitri session number 2. We are in Canto 1 of Book 1, The Symbol Dawn. Let's begin with a meditation. In lieu of a meditation bell, I have horns honking in the background. And hopefully the jackhammering will be off until lunch is over. But we'll see. I'm incredibly urban right now. Welcome, everyone. Happy to be with you all. Last session, I loved how it went, and I'm happy to continue in the same way. But I wanted to ask everyone if there's anything we would like to do differently.
I loved it too. I think it's very fine. Just wanted to mention that I will need to leave after an hour and a half, so that's my limit today.
I had one thought to have pass through the section that we covered last time, have a single pass through that, then continue on to the next section, then start with commentary, questions, observations for the second section, and then read that again. Or we could continue from where we left off, up to the group, really.
How about just the paragraph above it, the top of the page? I would like to have plenty of time to really focus on the second part, like we did on the first part before.
So there's a couple of options on the table, and anything else that anyone wants to offer. But I'd love to hear from a few other people.
Just a technical question. A paragraph is 5 verses or what? Andrea, you are muted.
The top of the page in my book starts with, "There was the common light of earthly day."
Yes. And so a paragraph is 10 verses. That's the question.
I'm just calling it a paragraph because that's
okay. It's your definition. I'm
no,
just
it's not a
wondering.
definition.
No, because I'm not a poet. I thought it is normal language between poets. So.
I just meant the
It's
section
okay.
above the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I always like rereading because it helps me get farther and farther into the text. So however, any rereading that we want to do will be great with me.
I'm good with the paragraph above. That works for me too.
And I would vote for the rereading because for the personal reason that I don't feel I absorbed the initial reading last week as well as I could have. However, if we were not to do the rereading from the beginning, I certainly could go back myself and reread that first section on my own.
Any thoughts from Mary? I think we've heard from. Did Mary say anything?
I didn't, and I guess I'm torn because I did a little reading this week, so I'm excited to move on, but I also see the value in going back and rereading as well. So I'm really happy to go with the flow.
A third thing just came to me. What if we did a thorough just what we did with the second section, just like we did last week with the first section, and then when we feel complete, read the entire canto straight through to kind of tie it all together. How's that sound? That might be a compromise between the two.
That works for me.
Idea.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to establish. So now everyone needs to either write something down or put on their memory cap, because all you need to remember is the person that you follow. Sound good? And I'm just going to go in the order around my screen. Jeffrey, John Robert, Andrea, me, Marco Masi, Marco Morelli, Mary. Okay, so does everyone know who they followed then? And we'll start with the second section. And Savitri too awoke among these tribes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, and to refresh, stop somewhere on the second page, like stop after the period on the second page, the first period, or somewhere, a period somewhere around a page change.
Because my page changes aren't the same as yours, so it's a bit complicated, but.
Yeah, yours would end with she gave, her passion, flower of love and doom she gave.
Okay. Okay. And Savitri, too, awoke among these tribes that hastened to join the brilliant summoner's chant, and, lured by the beauty of the apparent ways, acclaimed their portion of ephemeral joy. Akin to the eternity whence she came, no part she took in this small happiness, a mighty stranger in the human field. The embodied guest within made no response. The call that wakes the leap of human mind, its checkered, eager motion of pursuit, its fluttering hued illusion of desire, visited her heart like a sweet alien note. Time's message of brief light was not for her. In her, there was the anguish of the gods imprisoned in our transient human mold. The deathless conquered by the death of things, a vaster nature's joy that had once been hers, but long could keep not its gold heavenly hue or stand upon this brittle earthly base. A narrow movement on time's deep abysma, life's fragile littleness denied the power, the proud and conscious wideness and the bliss she had brought with her into the human form, the calm delight that weds one soul to all, the key to the flaming doors of ecstasy, earth's grain that needs the sap and pleasure and tears, rejected the undying rapture's boon, offered to the daughter of infinity her passion flower of love and doom she gave.
A prodigal of her rich divinity, herself, and all she was, she had lent to men, hoping her greater being to implant, and in their bodies' lives, acclimatize that heaven might native grow on mortal soil.
John Robert, I'm wondering if you could start with "In Vain Now Seemed."
Oh, sorry. In vain now seemed the splendid sacrifice. A prodigal of her rich divinity, herself, and all she was, she had lent to men, hoping her greater being to implant, and in their bodies' lives acclimatize, that heaven might native grow on mortal soil. Hard is it to persuade earth nature's change. Mortality bears ill the eternal's touch. It fears the pure divine intolerance of that assault of ether and of fire. It murmurs at its sorrowless happiness, almost with hate repels the light it brings. It trembles at its naked power of truth and the might and sweetness of its absolute voice. Inflicting on the heights the abysm's law, it sullies with its mire heaven's messengers. Its thorns of fallen nature are the defense it turns against Savior hands of grace. It meets the sons of God with death and pain. A glory of lightnings traversing the earth scene, their sun thoughts fading, darkened by ignorant minds, their work betrayed, their good to evil turned, the cross, their payment for the crown they gave. Only they leave behind a splendid name. A fire has come and touched men's hearts and gone. A few have caught from and risen to greater life. Too unlike the world she came to help and save. Her greatness weighed upon its ignorant breast, and from its dim chasms welled a dire return. A portion of its sorrow, struggle, fall. To live with grief, to confront on her road, the mortal's lot became the immortal's share.
Thus, trapped in the gin of earthly destinies, awaiting her ordeal's hour abode, outcast from her inborn felicity, accepting life's obscure terrestrial robe, hiding herself even from those she loved, the Godhead greater by a human fate. A dark foreknowledge separated her from all of whom she was the star and stay. Too great to impart the peril and the pain, in her torn depths she kept the grief to come. As one who, watching over men left blind, takes up the load of an unwitting race, harboring a foe whom with her heart she must feed, unknown her act, unknown the doom she faced, unhelped she must foresee and dread and dare. The long foreknown and fatal morn was here, bringing a noon that seemed like every noon. For nature walks upon her mighty way, unheeding when she breaks a soul, a life. Leaving her slain behind, she travels on. Man only marks, and God's all-seeing eyes. Even in this moment of her soul's despair, in its grim rendezvous with death and fear, no cry broke from her lips, no call for aid. She told the secret of her woe to none. Calm was her face, and courage kept her mute. Yet only her outward self suffered and strove. Even her humanity was half divine. Her spirit opened to the spirit in all. Her nature felt all nature as its own. Apart, living within, all lives she bore. Aloof, she carried in herself the world. Her dread was one with the great cosmic dread. Her strength was founded on the cosmic mights. The universal mother's love was hers. Against the evil at life's afflicted roots, her own calamity its private sign, of her pangs she made a mystic, poignant sword.
A solitary mind, a worldwide heart. To the lone immortal's unshared work she rose. At first life grieved not, in her burdened breast, on the lap of earth's original somnolence, inert, released into forgetfulness. Prone, it reposed, unconscious on mind's verge, obtuse and tranquil, like the stone and star. In a deep cleft of silence twixt two realms, she lay remote from grief, unsawn by care, nothing recalling of the sorrow here. Then a slow, faint remembrance, shadow-like, moved, and, sighing, she laid her hand upon her bosom and recognized the close and lingering ache, deep, quiet, old, made natural to its place, but knew not why it was there, nor whence it came. The power that kindles mind was still withdrawn. Heavy, unwilling were life's servitors, like workers with no wages of delight. Sullen, the torch of sense refused to burn. The unassisted brain found not its past. Only a vague earth nature held the frame. But now she stirred. Her life shared the cosmic load. At the summons of her body's voiceless call, her strong, far-winging spirit traveled back to the yoke of ignorance and fate, back to the labor and stress of mortal days, lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams, across the ebbing of the seas of sleep. Her house of nature felt an unseen sway. Illumined swiftly were life's darkened rooms, and memory's casements opened on the hours, and the tired feet of thought approached her doors.
All came back to her, earth and love and doom. The ancient disputants encircled her, like giant figures wrestling in the night. The godheads from the dim inconscient born awoke to struggle and the pang divine. And in the shadow of her flaming heart, at the sombre center of the dire debate, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss, inheriting the long agony of the globe. A stone still figure of high and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed regardless eyes. That saw grief's timeless death, but not life's goal. Afflicted by his harsh divinity, bound to his throne, he waited unappeased. The daily oblation of her unwept tears, all the fierce question of man's hours relieved. The sacrifice of suffering and desire, earth offers to the immortal ecstasy, began again beneath the eternal hand. Awake, she endured the moment's serried march, and looked on the screen, smiling dangerous world, and heard the ignorant cry of living things. Amid the trivial sounds, the unchanging scene, her soul arose confronting time and fate. Immobile in herself, she gathered force. This was the day when Satyavan must die.
So that's the end of the canto, right? Would we now want to discuss what we just read and then go back to the very beginning?
Didn't we decide to first go back and read the whole thing and then discuss?
I'm not sure.
Understood.
We can do whatever we want. I think I proposed discussing right now and then reading this section again. We could discuss and read the entire thing again. It's really open. I kind of want to be flexible with it and go with the flow. But now would be a good time to discuss if we want.
I thought we would discuss now, but I kind of need a little bit of help with the passage.
I could start things off by, could we flip to the table of contents? I could maybe say a few things that might help out a little bit. I'm on the first page of the table of contents, and book 1 is the book of beginnings. We just finished the symbol dawn, and the next canto is the issue. There's a real break in time right there. Actually, there was a real break in time when we read, and Savitri too awoke among these tribes. And right at the end there, this is the day when Satyavan must die. As far as the narrative arc goes, that passage that we just read is positioned after book 7. Book 7, the book of yoga, is the book of Savitri's yoga. And that book takes place, it's the entire year that Savitri and Satyavan have together. And she knows of his death approaching. So she's like quadrupling down on her yoga to prepare for this day. And if you look through the titles of book 7, the joy of union, this is union with Satyavan. The ordeal of the foreknowledge of death and the heart's grief and pain. This is it's not as if she wasn't doing yoga her whole life, but this supercharges her yoga. Then the parable of the search for the soul. This is Savitri finding her soul. This is her searching for her soul. To search for her soul, she enters into the inner countries and encounters all the false souls, the vital soul, the mental soul. All these layers of soul are in this canto, the triple soul forces. Then at last she finds her soul, and that leads to nirvana and the discovery of the all-negating absolute, a complete silence of everything, the passive Brahman. And then that leads to the discovery of the cosmic spirit and the cosmic consciousness. And the next book is the book of death. So that's the death of Satyavan. And this is the day that happens. So as far as the narrative arc goes, this is where we are. And if we look back to book 1, canto 2, it's the issue. This is kind of like a summary of the, a short take. I don't know if I'd call it a summary, but a short take of Savitri's yoga and why she undertook the yoga. And that's coming up in the next canto. And then in canto 3, we shift back. According to the legend, we shift back 18 years. And this begins Ashwapati's yoga, but 18 years before the moment that we just read. And this was the day when Satyavan must die. The yoga of the king is Savitri's father's yoga, Ashwapati's yoga. And that begins, I think, a world's desire compelled her mortal birth. That's the first line of Canto 3. And that her is Savitri, but then she's not mentioned for a very long time after that. This is the yoga of the king. This is then Ashwapati's process of him doing yoga to work to the meeting of the Divine Mother, from whom Ashwapati asks for the boon of Savitri's birth. That's what Sri Aurobindo starts this off. A world's desire compelled her mortal birth, Savitri's mortal birth. So I think that's that's probably about what I'll say as far as positioning us in the narrative arc for now. And I'm super happy if someone else comments or questions at this point.
So I'm still a little clear how the first part that we read last time and this part connect, because what you described seems quite different from the early part that we read, which is more about birth and things, I thought.
Yeah, the first part that we read last time was the symbol dawn. So there was a lot of language in which he talked about kind of the greater dawn that happens, the dawn of consciousness, the dawn of manifestation, and this dawn, this physical dawn that Savitri is waking up in, is a symbol of that greater dawn. Because Savitri's work on this day, the day that Satyavan's going to die, is going to be a world-changing event. So it's like during this whole day, this 24-hour period, or really this 12-hour period, Savitri is going to move the evolution of the world forward. And so the first part of this canto was about that kind of symbolic larger realm. And then this section that we started today, and Savitri too, awoke among these tribes, is taking us back to the physical day when she wakes up. She's sleeping like everybody else, like the rest of the world, the rest of the world in her area. And then Sri Aurobindo describes in very precise and minute detail what this waking up for her is like. So at first, it's just her mind is off. She's dreaming, and her dream body has not come back yet. And so there's not a whole lot she's not completely present. And he describes that in a very slow, step-by-step, beautiful way about how she wakes up. And as she wakes up, she also eventually wakes up to the realization that this is the day when Satyavan is going to die. And that's the suffering that she's going through, that she wakes up to, that he does.
Thank you. That's very clear.
You're welcome.
So I have just a quick question about a line in that first paragraph where says, the call that wakes up the leap of human mind, its checkered eager motion of pursuit, its fluttering hued illusion of desire, visited her heart like a sweet alien note. Time's message of brief light was not for her. So I guess my question is about time's message of brief light was not for her. Is this because because the message of brief light is more about Satyavan's life or symbolically all of our lives being brief, and she has sort of a consciousness beyond that point? Is it, or is it because she's not awake yet?
I think it is because she is more than human.
Okay.
And this is what becomes clear in this passage, that she takes on the human pain and grief. And at the same time, it describes beautifully how there's a whole other part of her that is centered in her divinity.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure I was feeling that the right way.
I could add a little bit to that. So the call that wakes the leap of human mind, Sri Aurobindo in this passage has just been talking about the waking of the peoples of the fields and the animals and everything. And people, we wake up for kind of common, ordinary things. What's gonna get us out of bed this morning? Is it going to be breakfast, or is it going to be, I've got a lot of things to do? Or I think that may be one of the metaphors that's being expressed here in Time's message of brief light was not for her. Because then he says, in her there was the anguish of the gods. She's dealing, she does have to get up and get dressed and all that kind of thing. But her real concern is this vast battle that she already knows is beginning with death, with the death of her husband, in which she's going to contest.
So I'm not sure if this is an appropriate comment to make, but so Savitri knows her husband is doomed on this day. So I guess we're going to find out how that happens. But my wife died in my arms, and it was one of the most dramatic events of my life. So I can't imagine knowing ahead of time. I knew she was going to die one day in this short period of time, but knowing exactly would be really difficult.
Thank you for sharing, Jeffrey. Yes, any shares like that are super appropriate. I can't imagine either. And yeah, I don't know. All I'm saying is thank you for sharing, Jeffrey. And yes, we will find out in detail why she knows a year in advance. We'll keep doing some walking through the table of contents to position in the narrative arc. But the answer to that is in the previous book, to the book of yoga. It's called the Book of Fate. And that's where she has met Satyavan, and she goes back to her to the castle in Madra, and the king and queen are there, and in comes an oracle named Narad, and he sees it right away, and there's an unfolding where he lets the king Savitri know, and there unfolds a different part of the narrative. Marco, you're muted. I see your mouth moving.
I had a question about the line that begins on the second page of this section. Earth's grain that needs the sap of pleasure and tears rejected the undying rapture's boon. I know that that's referring to Savitri's calm delight that weds one soul to all. And then there's this colon, and the next two lines are, offered to the daughter of infinity, her passion flower of love and doom she gave. Who is the daughter of infinity? Is that Earth or something else?
I believe that's Savitri. So you could read that her passion flower of love and doom offered to the daughter of divinity, offered to the daughter of infinity, she gave. Yeah, I'm not sure that explains it though.
The subject, she is Savitri, I understand. And she's giving a passion flower of love and doom. But I guess I don't understand.
Wait a minute. She had brought with her into human form. I don't think that she is Savitri, but I'm like trying to track right now.
Can somebody help me where we were located? I missed it.
Yeah, we're between pages 6 and 7.
Oh,
End of 6, beginning of 7.
I think it's maybe it's Earth gave her passion her passion flower of love and doom to the daughter of infinity, which is Savitri. So Earth's grain. Earth is in the previous clause.
Mm.
So Earth is giving, offering to the daughter of divinity, Earth's passion flower of love and doom. Earth mixes love and doom together in its flowers. So that's the way I read it.
But rejects her rapture's boon. Part of what I think that makes sense to me, but what's interesting to me in this passage is that there's a conflict. Savitri has something to offer to temporal life, to mortals, and there's a rejection of what she has to offer, but there's something also necessary about that rejection. Earth's grain needs pleasure and tears, needs embodied experience. I interpret this to be saying that in not only perhaps cannot have or refuses what the divine has to offer as an alternative to that sorrowful state. But I'm not sure. What do others think?
I think it's amazing how much foreshadowing is in your comments, Marco, of what's to come with her, not only the debate with love and death, which is the debate of Savitri and death, but once death is transformed, there's all these things that the transformed quality of death, the God version of death, starts offering Savitri that she rejects in favor of this circuitry with her and Satyavan and earth and the transcendent divine all together, divinizing, basically rejecting the highest possibilities that we can envision in favor of a complete divinized manifestation without, it's beautiful. So I think that you're picking up on all these foreshadowing cues really well, actually. And John Robert, I appreciate also kind of breaking that down. I saw it better after you diagrammed it for us.
But
So go ahead.
sorry. Oh, okay, thank you. Just a question: Is Savitri, can it be considered also an emanation of the Divine Mother? So, because then daughter of infinity would make much sense to me. She is a daughter of infinity. That it is just another way to say she is an emanation of who was it? Maheshwari? I don't remember now. There are different names for the female aspect of the divine. So just my own interpretation. Daughter of Infinity might be interpreted also in this way.
Yes, I think she's considered the manifestation of the Divine Mother. So she's a direct coming down of the Divine Mother. But she cannot bring all of that in because she also needs to be fully human. Otherwise, she cannot make a change in humanity. To change humanity, you need to become human. And this is the curse of the Avatar coming down, that they have to come down into the human suffering. So they have to actually deny their, the ecstatic vastness of their divinity to accept the yoke of being human. That's my understanding.
So I have some questions too about the end of the canto. So I don't know if it's your last page, but the last two paragraphs kind of thing. So the ancient disputants encircled her like giant figures wrestling in the night. And then a bit further down, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss inheriting the long agony of the globe. So are we talking about Savitri again here, or I guess, huh? But the disputes, the ancient disputants is unclear to me.
The her is Savitri. The ancient disputants, I think, can be considered like the gods of duality, the beings of the manifestation. That the same as a few pages before, the earth's grain that needs the sap of pleasure and tears. That there's many forms of the disputants, but I think that the disputants can be considered like the polarizing or the apparently polarized beings.
So if you look at the line before the ancient disputants, Sri Aurobindo actually identifies what he's talking about here. All came back to her, earth, love, and doom, the ancient disputants encircled her. So earth, love, and doom are the ancient disputants, looks like in this sentence here. So love and doom are obviously seem like opposites to us, and then the situation is earth that nourishes that kind of duality, that kind of adventure. Yeah, do we already have the phrase, the adventure of consciousness and joy? Yeah, so
because it's an unusual to call doom a kind of character as opposed to, a force, an event.
I think this is what Sri Aurobindo does. He describes these forces as entities. They are true emanations. And so then the earth, love, and doom, then I think doom as a cosmic entity is described in this stone still figure of high and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed regardless eyes, that saw grief's timeless depths but not life's goal. Afflicted by his harsh divinity, bound to his throne, he waited unappeased the daily oblation of her unwept tears. So their doom is embodied in this large figure that governs that particular grief of the earth.
Thank you. I think we're used to thinking of earth as an entity and maybe even love, but doom is a bit unusual, so that does help.
It struck me when reading that like earth, love, and doom are the disruptors of our equilibrium. you know, when we're seeking equanimity, that the earth being just the, you know, what comes with being embodied here alive, and then the high highs and the very low lows, or the love and doom, that if we attach to too much, we are knocked off our center. And so they're truly the disruptors, that we just seek to find our calmness as we navigate with it all.
I'd just like to say it's lovely having all these different perspectives about the first canto.
Are we ready to start over at the beginning?
There's one more that I can't find the line, but something about Earth not even blinking, or nature not even blinking when she takes a soul. Somewhere in here was that line. And I don't know, it's kind of speaks to doom with a capital D, right? An earthquake wipes out 20,000 people in one clip without even registering it, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
For nature walks upon her mighty way, unheeding when she breaks a soul, a life. Is that what you meant, Matteo? It's in the middle, a little bit past the middle of page 8.
Ah, yes.
I left my marked copy of Savitri at home, and it's so weird to be holding a fresh copy without anything marked. But does everyone want to start from the beginning now? I'm seeing a lot of yeses. So we left off with, go ahead, Mark.
This is not maybe something for discussion. Before we go back, I'd want to note that I'm curious why she's so unsharing with her grief. There's some way that she's keeping it to herself, and I wonder what that's about. But I suspect that may be sensing a foreshadowing that will be answered later. So I don't necessarily I don't want to require discussion about that. I just want to note it.
But she is protecting her loved ones. She doesn't want anyone to suffer. This is her job. It's not their job. They don't want them. She doesn't want anyone to carry her burden. And because she's so beloved by all of them, you know, Savitri, Satyavan to begin with, and his parents, everybody adores her because she's such a fine presence. She doesn't want to burden anyone with what is her burden. This is what she came for. She came for this. And she knows that she needs to carry this alone. So she's protecting all the ones who love her to not burden them with her grief. She doesn't want Satyavan to know about it either. He doesn't know that this is coming. It's all hers.
And then it says it's an oblation, so it's an offering to God, her holding it within.
Thank you.
And she's able to utilize her pangs to make a mystic, poignant sword.
I like that sword.
Do yoga.
And Sri Aurobindo will talk about her aloneness and her silence in the cantos ahead also.
It's such a complex poem.
Marco Massi, would you like to start, since you kind of had just a half page, would you like to start us off, and then to refresh the order, Marco Massi, Marco Morelli, Oh, the order shifted on. Mary, Jeffrey, John Robert, Andrea, me.
Okay. The symbol dawn. It was the hour before the gods awake. Across the path of the divine event. The huge, foreboding mind of night, alone in her unlit temple of eternity, lay stretched immobile upon silence, marked. Almost one felt opaque, impenetrable, in the sombre symbol of her eyeless muse. The abysm of the unbodied infinite. A fathomless zero occupied the world. Power of fallen, boundless self awake. Between the first and the last nothingness. Recalling the tenebrous womb from which it came, turned from the insoluble mystery of birth and the tardy process of mortality, and longed to reach its end in vacant naught, as in a dark beginning of all things. A mute, featureless semblance of the unknown, repeating forever the unconscious act, prolonging forever the unseeing will, cradled the cosmic jaws of ignorant force, whose moved creative slumber kindles the suns, and carries our lives in its somnambulist whirl. Athwart the wan, enormous trance of space, its formless stupor without mind or life, a shadow spinning through a soulless void, thrown back once more into unthinking dreams, earth wheeled abandoned in the hollow gulfs, forgetful of her spirit and her fate. The impassive skies were neutral, empty, still. Then something in the inscrutable darkness stirred. A nameless movement, an unthought idea. Insistent, dissatisfied, without a name. Something that wished but knew not how to be. Teased the inconscient to wake ignorance.
It's 12 o'clock.
A throe that came and left a quivering trace, gave room for an old tired want unfilled. At peace in its subconscient moonless cave, to raise its head and look for absent light. Straining closed eyes of vanished memory, like one who searches for a bygone self and only meets the corpse of his desire. It was as though even in this naught's profound, even in this ultimate dissolution's core, there lurked an unremembering entity, survivor of a slain and buried past, condemned to resume the effort and the pang, reviving in another frustrate world. An unshaped consciousness desired light, and a blank prescience yearned towards distant change. As if a childlike finger laid on a cheek, reminded of the endless need in things, the heedless mother of the universe. An infant longing clutched the somber vast. I'd like to read that last sentence again. As if a childlike finger laid on a cheek, reminded of the endless need in things, the heedless mother of the universe, an infant longing clutched the somber vast. Insensibly, somewhere, a breach began. A long, lone line of hesitating hue, like a vague smile tempting a desert heart, troubled the far rim of life's obscure sleep. Arrived from the other side of boundlessness, an eye of deity peered through the dumb deeps. A scout in a reconnaissance from the sun, it seemed amid a heavy cosmic rest, the torpor of a sick and weary world, to seek for a spirit, soul, and desolate, too fallen to recollect forgotten bliss. Intervening in a mindless universe, its message crept through the reluctant hush, calling the adventure of consciousness and joy, and conquering nature's disillusioned breast, compelled renewed consent to see and feel.
A thought was sown in the unsounded void. A sense was born within the darkness's depths. A memory quivered in the heart of time, as if a soul long dead were moved to live. But the oblivion that succeeds the fall had blotted the crowded tablets of the past, and all that was destroyed must be rebuilt, and old experience labored out once more. All can be done if the God touch is there. A hope stole in that hardly dared to be amid the night's forlorn indifference, as if solicited in an alien world with timid and hazardous instinctive grace, orphaned and driven out to seek a home, an errant marvel with no place to live, into a far-off nook of heaven there came a slow, miraculous gesture's dim appeal. The persistent thrill of a transfiguring touch persuaded the inert black quietude, and beauty and wonder disturbed the fields of God. A wandering hand of pale, enchanted light that glowed along a fading moment's brink, fixed with gold panel and opalescent hinge, a gate of dreams ajar on mystery's verge. One lucent corner windowing hidden things forced the world's blind immensity to sight. The darkness failed and slipped like a falling cloak from the reclining body of a god. Then through the pallid rift that seemed at first hardly enough for a trickle from the suns, outpoured the revelation and the flame. The brief, perpetual sign recurred above, a glamour from unreached transcendences, iridescent with the glory of the unseen, a message from the unknown immortal light, ablaze upon creation's quivering edge. Dawn built her aura of magnificent hues and buried its seed of grandeur in the hours.
An instant's visitor, the Godhead shone, On life's thin border, a while the vision stood and bent over earth's pondering forehead curve, interpreting a recondite beauty and bliss in colors hieroglyphs of mystic sense. It wrote the lines of a significant myth, telling of a greatness of spiritual dawns, a brilliant code penned with the sky for page. Almost that day, the epiphany was disclosed, of which our thoughts and hopes are signal flares. A lonely splendor from the invisible goal almost was flung on the opaque inane. Once more, a tread perturbed the vacant vasts, infinity's center. A face of rapturous calm parted the eternal lids that open heaven. A form from far beatitudes seemed to near. Ambassadors twixt eternity and change, the omniscient goddess leaned across the breaths that wrap the fated journeyings of the stars and saw the spaces ready for her feet. Once she half looked behind her for her veiled son, then thoughtful went to her immortal work. Earth felt the imperishable's passage close. The waking ear of nature heard her steps, and wideness turned to her its limitless eye, and scattered on sealed depths, her luminous smile kindled to fire the silence of the worlds. All grew a consecration and a rite. Air was a vibrant link between earth and heaven, the wide-winged hymn of a great priestly wind arose and failed upon the altar hills. The high boughs prayed in a revealing sky.
Jeffrey,
Okay.
thank you. I know you don't have page breaks.
Yeah.
Here, where our half-lit ignorance skirts the gulfs on the dumb bosom of the ambiguous earth. Here, where one knows not even the step in front, has her throne on the shadowy back of doubt. On this anguished and precarious field of toil, outspread beneath some large indifferent gaze, impartial witness of our joy and bale, our prostrate soil bore the awakening ray. Here too, the vision and prophetic gleam lit into miracles, common meaningless shapes. Then the divine afflatus, spent, withdrew, unwanted, fading from the mortal's range. A sacred yearning lingers trace, the worship of a presence and a power too perfect to be held by death-bound hearts, the prescience of a marvelous birth to come. Only a little the godlight can stay. Spiritual beauty illumining human sight, lines with its passion and mystery, matter's mask, and squanders eternity on a beat of time. As when a soul draws near the sill of birth, adjoining mortal time to timelessness, a spark of deity lost in matter's crypt, its luster vanishes in the inconscient plains. That transitory glow of magic fire, so now dissolved in bright accustomed air. The message ceased, and waned the messenger. The single call, the uncompanioned power, drew back into some far-off secret world the hue and marvel of the supernal being. She looked no more on our mortality. The excess of beauty natural to Godkind could not uphold its claim on time-born eyes. Too mystic real for space tenancy, her body of glory was expunged from heaven. The rarity and wonder lived no more.
There was the common light of earthly day, affranchised from the respite of fatigue. Once more the rumor of the speed of life pursued the cycles of her blinded quest. All sprang to their unvarying daily acts. The thousand peoples of the soil and tree obeyed the unforeseeing instant's urge, and, leader here with his uncertain mind, alone who stares at the future's covered face, man lifted up the burden of his fate. And Savitri too awoke among these tribes that hastened to join the brilliant summoner's chant, and, lured by the beauty of the apparent ways, acclaimed their portion of ephemeral joy. Akin to the eternity whence she came, no part she took in this small happiness. A mighty stranger in the human field, the embodied guest within made no response. The call that wakes the leap of human mind, its checkered eager motion of pursuit, its fluttering hued illusion of desire, visited her heart like a sweet alien note. Time's message of brief light was not for her. In her there was the anguish of the gods, imprisoned in our transient human mold, the deathless conquered by the death of things. A vaster nature's joy had once been hers, but long could keep not its gold heavenly hue, or stand upon this brittle earthly base. A narrow movement on time's deep abysm, life's fragile littleness denied the power, the proud and conscious wideness and the bliss she had brought with her into the human form. The calm delight that weds one soul to all, the key to the flaming doors of ecstasy.
Earth's grain that needs the sap of pleasure and tears, rejected the undying rapture's boon, offered to the daughter of infinity her passion flower of love and doom she gave. In vain now seemed the splendid sacrifice, a prodigal of her rich divinity, herself and all she was, she had lent to men, hoping her greater being to implant, and in their bodies' lives acclimatize, that heaven might native grow on mortal soil. Hard is it to persuade earth nature's change. Mortality bears ill the eternal's touch. It fears the pure divine intolerance of that assault of ether and of fire. It murmurs at its sorrowless happiness, almost with hate repels the light it brings. It trembles at its naked power of truth and the might and sweetness of its absolute voice, inflicting on the heights the abysm's law. It sullies with its mire heaven's messengers. Its thorns of fallen nature are the defense it turns against the Savior hands of grace. It meets the sons of God with death and pain. A glory of lightnings traversing the earth scene, their sun thoughts fading, darkened by ignorant minds, their work betrayed, their good to evil turn, the cross their payment for the crown they gave. Only they leave behind a splendid name. A fire has come and touched men's hearts and gone. A few have caught flame and risen to greater life. Too unlike the world she came to help and save. Her greatness weighed upon its ignorant breast, and from its dim chasms welled a dire return, a portion of its sorrow, struggle, fall, to live with grief, to confront death on her road. The mortal's lot became the immortal's share.
Thus, trapped in the gin of earthly destinies, awaiting her ordeal's hour abode, outcast from the inborn felicity, accepting life's obscure terrestrial robe, hiding herself even from those she loved, the Godhead greater by a human fate. A dark foreknowledge separated her from all of whom she was the star and stay, too great to impart the peril and the pain. In her torn death she kept the grief to come, as one who, watching over man left blind, takes up the load of an unwitting race, harboring a foe whom with her heart she must feed, unknown her act, unknown the doom she faced, unhelped she must foresee and dread and dare. The long foreknown and fatal morn was here, bringing a noon that seemed like every noon. For nature walks upon her mighty way, unheeding when she breaks a soul alive. Leaving her slain behind, she travels on. Man only marks and God's all-seeing eyes. Even in this moment of her soul's despair, in its grim rendezvous with death and fear, no cry broke from her lips, no call for aid. She told the secret of her woe to none. Calm was her face and courage kept her mute. Yet only her outward self suffered and strove. Even her humanity was half divine. Her spirit opened to the spirit in all. Her nature felt all nature as its own. Apart, living within, all lives she bore. Aloof, she carried in herself the world. Her dread was one with the great cosmic dread. Her strength was founded on the cosmic mights. The universal mother's love was hers. Against the evil and life's afflicted roots, Her own calamity its private sign, of her pangs she made a mystic poignant sword.
A solitary mind, a worldwide heart. To the lone immortal's unshared work she rose. At first life grieved not in her burdened breast. On the lap of earth's original somnolence inert, released into forgetfulness, prone it reposed, unconscious on mind's verge, obtuse and tranquil like the stone and star. In a deep cleft of silence twixt two realms, she lay remote from grief, unsawn by care, nothing recalling of the sorrow here. Then a slow, faint remembrance shadow-like moved, and sighing she laid her hand upon her bosom, and recognized the close and lingering ache. Deep, quiet, old, made natural to its place, but knew not why it was there, nor whence it came. The power that kindles mind was still withdrawn. Heavy, unwilling were life's servitors, like workers with no wages of delight. Sullen, the torch of sense refused to burn. The unassisted brain found not its past. Only a vague earth nature held the frame. But now she stirred, her life shared the cosmic load. At the summons of her body's voiceless call, her strong, far-winging spirit traveled back to the yoke of ignorance and fate, back to the labor and stress of mortal days, lighting a pathway through strange symbol dreams, across the ebbing of the seas of sleep. Her house of nature felt an unseen sway. Illumined swiftly were life's darkened rooms, and memory's casements opened on the hours, and the tired feet of thought approached her doors. All came back to her. Earth and love and doom. The ancient disputants encircled her like giant figures wrestling in the night. The godheads from the dim inconscient born awoke to struggle and the pang divine, and in the shadow of her flaming heart, at the somber center of the dire debate, a guardian of the unconsoled abyss, inheriting the long agony of the globe, a stone-still figure of high and godlike pain, stared into space with fixed, regardless eyes that saw grief's timeless depths, but not life's goal.
Afflicted by his harsh divinity, bound to his throne, he waited, unappeased, the daily oblation of her unwept tears. All the fierce question of man's hours relived. The sacrifice of suffering and desire earth offers to the immortal ecstasy began again beneath the eternal hand. Awake, she endured the moment's serried march and looked on this green, smiling, dangerous world and heard the ignorant cry of living things. Amid the trivial sounds, the unchanging scene, her soul arose, confronting time and fate. Immobile in herself, she gathered force. This was the day when Satyavan must die.
I know at least Andrea has to go. I'm happy to stay on a little longer to discuss if anyone wants to.
Thank you all for a wonderful, wonderful time. Really, really love it. Thank you. Looking forward to next time. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Andrea. I'm liking this format of read and then discuss and then read. It just, it helps it sink deeper for me. And I don't know, I can't remember. I think John Robert and I have been having this conversation for a while of getting to like really clear presence with it, like that being the first step of just trying to stay present, and then like having it lead to actually experiencing these lines in some way on the different parts of the being. It seems I don't even know how to put it. It seems there seems to be a whole lot possible with Savitri, which is why I've been going over and over with it for years now. It seems to always touch something different in me.
I can't stay on too much longer, and I know we're also going to connect a little bit later, but I have a question that came up at the second reading. I suppose it was there the first time around as well, about this transition with the in the middle of the last page, going bound to his throne, he waited unappeased, and the daily oblation of her unwept tears. I think that refers to Satyavan, but I'm not sure. No. So the he.
I think it's the being of doom, waiting for her unwept tear, waiting for her tears, like he's trying to break her.
Oh, okay.
Now I say things like this, and then John Robert pinpoints pinpoints where it's at. What do you think, John Robert?
So probably a guardian of the unconsoled abyss, which would be death or doom, would be the subject there. guardian, inheriting, and then this guardian is a stone-like figure of high godlike pain, stared. So the verb would be stared. And then the he refers back to that guardian, bound to his throne. So we could also say it's pain. A stone still figure of high and godlike pain. That is the basic conflict in this, in the whole epic, is the battle between death and love. Death represented by himself, and love represented by Savitri.
It's such a equipoise of non-satisfaction. Neither is she giving her grief, neither is she sharing her grief, nor does this figure get to receive it. So they're kind of locked in a stalemate, it seems, in this moment.
Well said.
I'm curious about this figure and the different maybe valences or ways that Aurobindo names him or it, doom, death, pain, and that it's like a tunnel vision that it has, or a single-sided vision. It only sees one side of things, sees the grief but does not see the goal. And a harsh divinity, I think, is a really poignant phrase. Thank you.
I was also thinking about the language here because so Aurobindo was Indian in origin, but he was educated in England, right? Because the mastery of the language here is, extraordinary for somebody who's not a native English speaker.
We could say that English was his first language. Already when he was 5 years old, he was sent to a convent in the foothills of the Himalaya where English was spoken, and his father was an Anglophile. So his father really wants to be educated in English and in England. And so when he was 7, he was sent away to England, and he had no real contact, a few letters, but he was in England until he was about 20 or something like that. So he really became a master of English by speaking it, and of course with his genius.
I remember that I have read somewhere that his father sent him to England because he wanted to send him away from the mystic atmosphere of India that he regarded as absolutely detrimental for his son. So I find it really a paradox when you think about the aim of his father and what Sri Aurobindo became after. That's a joke of the faith, so to speak.
Sri Aurobindo said that early in his life he was an atheist.
And all those things became part of his synthesis in the sense that he also criticized the spiritualist denying the material realm. And we see it in this canto.
I think something perhaps of that atheism in the form of a nihilism is in this first part, the very, very first part of the poem, where there's a fathomless zero occupying the world, the nihil of nihilism, I read that as. And then a power of fallen, boundless self awake between the first and the last nothingness. And then a couple lines, I'll just keep recalling the tenebrous womb from which it came, turned from the insoluble mystery of birth and the tardy process of mortality, and longed to reach its end in vacant naught, purposelessness, meaninglessness. I wonder if that phase of Aurobindo's life, when he was an atheist, perhaps more steeping in that nihil, that zero, I wonder if that's reflected or if that's included in this part at the very beginning of this poem here. If that sense is part of what also recurs back in the drama between death and love and Savitri. I haven't read the whole thing, so I feel like I maybe picking up on things, but I'll find out. I don't necessarily need an answer from anybody here. It's just what I'm noticing.
It's interesting how you interpreted this, Marco, because I had a completely different interpretation, but it is because of my probably professional deformation. And so I just see perhaps everything like, but for me here, I saw the description of a sort of, maybe it's interesting also what Jeffrey can say about it, because he is a physicist too. And for me here, it can be also seen as a description of the pre-Big Bang phase of the universe. Before the universe, there was nothing in the sense of the material universe, and yet there was something from which it originated. And if you look at this from the mental consciousness, this something is nothing. So sorry for the wordplay, but the origin of everything is something transcendent, and but the mind could be also described as a fathomless zero, or where is it? Nothingness, featureless semblance of the unknown, and so an enormous trance of space. And I can interpret this also something just before the Big Bang, there was this nothingness from which, however, something came out. But this nothingness is not really nothingness. It's only because we see it from our mental point of view. And I think this could be because when he says the first verse, it was the hour before the gods awake. As far as I know, in the what do you say? In this, it is a telling that the gods were created before the material universe, and they preside to the material universe now. So this must be something even before the creation of the material universe. But okay, this, and where he says, between the first and the last nothingness. So there are the first and the last nothingness. This reminds me the theory of pralaya in the Hindu mythology, you have this idea of the creation of universe, expands or whatever it is, happens something, and then collapses again in this nothingness, and then is created again. These are the cycles, the pralaya cycles. But who knows? Perhaps we have to ask Sri Aurobindo, or I ask you if you would see this interpretation as possible.
I'll just say that we're going to go back to the nothingness many times in this canto, in this epic. So we will see how Sri Aurobindo treats it in various ways.
Was nihilism a movement before his time? I'm trying to sort of remember my history of that. Anarchy was, I guess, maybe nihilism as a movement preceded this period. I mean, he might have been aware of something and that informed the idea of zero, but I think like Marco and that it may be more positive, a negative for a positive, as it were, rather than negative in the way that well, I suppose nihilism can be a negative for a positive, but anyway.
I would suspect that he would have been aware of. Well, nihilism was a movement. It was a political movement in, I think, 1850s, 60s Russia. But then Nietzsche had written about nihilism in the 70s, and I believe Aurobindo had read Nietzsche. So I imagine that he was aware of that notion that the world, the Western world in particular, was entering into a phase of what Nietzsche called the transvaluation of values. And Nietzsche, of course, didn't offer a divine transmutation of those values. He offered a principle of will to power and a set of other ideas, or such as the eternal return. There are a lot of interesting, I think, resonances across those thinkers, and Debashish Banerjee, I believe, writes a little bit about that dialogue. I really like the cosmological interpretation as well, though. I think that that's a really pregnant angle to take on the text. And I feel that I sense that part of what this story is about as well, this first part, is the involutionary process. It's starting from this kind of even logos on page 4. There's a brilliant code penned with the sky for a page. And almost that day, the epiphany was disclosed, of which our thoughts and hopes are signal flares. So that's the primordial light. And then it withdraws. So there's this imbuing of divinity into inconscient matter, but then there's the withdrawal of divinity into almost a state of incommensurability, where on the one hand there's the earthly plane of death and suffering, and there's a divine plane of bliss and delight and consciousness. But in the middle here is where the drama takes place, and we need that involutionary setup in order to create the space for for that argument, or for the story to unfold. Is that a plausible reading, do you think?
Sure.
I think that everything that everyone is saying is super plausible, and yes, Sri Aurobindo was a fan of Nietzsche. I don't know if I have any other comments on what Marco were saying, other than yes, it's kind of all these things.
I made a quick keyword search in the Life Divine and nihilism. Maybe I can read the part on which Sri Aurobindo says something about that. I don't know how much pertinent it is to this passage, but because I just looked at it, but if you wish, should I read it a bit? Yeah, okay. Well, he begins with a paragraph initially with an infinite mind of this character might possibly construct an accidental cosmos of conflicting possibilities, and it might shape it into something shifting, something always transient, something ever uncertain in its drift, neither real nor unreal, possessed of no definite end or aim, but only an endless succession of momentary aims leading, since there is no superior directing power of knowledge, eventually now hither. I don't know what this word is, now hither. Then he says, nihilism or illusionism or some kindred philosophy is the only logical conclusion of such a pure nominalism. The cosmos, so constructed, would be a presentation or reflection of something not itself, but always and to the end a false presentation, a distorted reflection. All cosmic existence would be a mind struggling to work out fully its imaginations, but not succeeding because they have no imperative basis of self-truth. Overpowered and carried forward by the streams of its own past energies, it would be borne onward indeterminately, forever, without issue, unless or until it can either slay itself or fall into an eternal stillness. That trace to its roots is nihilism and illusionism, and it is the only wisdom if we suppose that our human mentality or anything at all like it represents the highest cosmic force and the original conception at work in the universe. Well, that would need an entire, yeah, it's a lot of stuff that is coming together. I don't know, but I just tell you that if you search on the Life Divine, he's trying to explain what for him is nihilism, and that it is something, as I understand it, that it comes out of our mental conceptions, not a higher understanding of the cosmos.
I think that can be briefly summarized as only acknowledging impermanence without acknowledging permanence. And it has roots back to Heraclitus in that aphorism that Plato misquoted, "You can't step in the same river twice." The actual aphorism was, "You can and you cannot step into the same river twice." So in that lovely paragraph you just read, it's like the culmination of the path of impermanence. And I love how Sri Aurobindo just kind of takes us there in a full-bodied way.
And the nihilism that Nietzsche talks about comes about because of what he calls the death of God, the death of the permanent principle of the eternal, leaving us with only the fallen world that humanity has to lift up in some way, which is where the section ends, where Aurobindo writes, alone, he says that man lifted up the burden of his fate. And to me, that's kind of, that is the state of not having assistance, not being like Atlas, carrying the world on your shoulder, and it's all on the human. I think that that's part of the kind of logical conclusion that Aurobindo is pointing to, if one only has impermanence and not an eternal principle, or a principle of the divine or of the ultimate. So this is very interesting. Thank you.
Is this a good point to wrap with a couple-minute meditation? Yeah. Anyone else have further comments? Good. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Lovely session.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Everyone.
Take
Thank
care.
Thank you.
Next
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Till next time.
Bye-bye.